Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Cat B and Andy B Inspired Connections podcast. We're coming to you, as always, transatlantic from the UK and the US. And this is our very special first Easter episode. So today is going to be a little different. It's just going to be Cat and I, and we're going to be talking about kind of what we think is most significant about this thing that we both decided was a great idea. So, welcome, Cat. Happy Easter.
Happy Easter, everybody. Lovely to see you, my darlings. Yeah, so we kind of it was a bit of an experiment, this podcast show, in that we kind of followed the inspired connection ourselves. We got thrown in together by the kids in the spirit world, and we've gone along and we've now done 31 interviews, and it's kind of really interesting because seeing these inspired connections happen to everybody. They happen to extraordinary people in everyday life. Some people don't even go looking for them. Some people don't even realize the significance of them until they look back in hindsight at them. And so I thought, at the beginning of this process, I wrote a little bit of a mission statement, and I thought it'd be kind of nice to kind of go through that mission statement and have a look and sort of pull out or draw out some of the interviews that we've had as to whether we feel that aligns with what we're seeing, and kind of what are the kind of really interesting sort of books that have really touched us or kind of left impressions in our mind over the last few weeks, because there's been a lot to take in and everybody's story is so different and unique and individual that I thought it'd be nice to have a bit of a recap, if you will. So the mission statement for the Inspired Connections podcast show that I wrote down at the beginning of this journey 32 weeks ago was that our mission would be to illustrate that we have a sacred connection at the heart that connects us all to the divine, and that when we open our heart centers to receive divine inspiration, these enlightened sights can shine a light of awareness on situations, bringing with them greater love, connections, joy, and healing that can uplift us and help us to create the positive changes that we may have been seeking within our lives. They help us to shift us from one location to another. We understand that we can't always change the circumstances we find ourselves in, but we do notice that these inspired connections can be very powerful, very impactful and healing, bringing with them renewed comfort and ease. They have the power to bring new people into our lives. They appear at any time, can come out of nowhere. Sometimes they have got divine inspired timing and come at milestone dates, but they also appear to create connection with the living, not just those in the spirit world, but also appear to reconnect the heart center to the loving memories of those that we love that have transitioned this physical life, indicating that the souls may still journey alongside us in some non-physical, metaphysical way, perhaps. Magical, insightful, creative, these inspired connections are very personal, can sometimes transform our vision of the world, bringing us closer to Mother Nature, helping us restore health, vitality, looking after the planet, one another, and all living things with greater vigour. They give us a greater and deeper connection to ourselves and inspire us to live better lives, helping us to reach our highest potential and sometimes to fulfil our hopes, dreams, aspirations, while at other times taking us in completely new directions that provide service to others. They help us to transcend grief and to reach a greater perspective and understanding, bringing with them more comfort. We hope that through these weekly podcasts, we can bring inspirational stories of inspired connection from everyday, extraordinary people like you and I, who've experienced these heart-centered connections. That we all have a greater awareness of these magical experiences, what they look like, what they consist of, and how they inspire to connect. We hope that through this awareness, we can all learn and gain insights into how they arise, operate, identifying the differences that they can make in people's lives. Even though these inspired connections sometimes defy normal rationale, logical thinking and strategies, we hope by sharing these connections with you that you also feel inspired to live a connected life full of magical, sacred connections that enlighten your path with wonder, hope and awe, helping us all inspire connection. So a bit of a mouthful, Andy.
That's a hell of a mission. I don't know if anybody realizes that's what we're trying to do.
I don't know, we do we? But
Oh,
it's a starting point. But I think in some ways the interviews so far have cemented my belief that they do happen to everyday individual people who have extraordinary lives. I think what we've seen clearly, especially if I look back at Nan and Jeff's interview, that some people don't go looking for these inspired connections. They don't even know that they exist until they look back in hindsight, or they meet other people and they realise that other people are getting these profound connections, and so they appreciate what they've experienced themselves as being these same signs and synchronicities. So it's kind of interesting, isn't it? We've got kind of two schools of people. Some people that have got an awareness of inspired connections and are really sort of blossoming with them and sort of and seeing lots of signs and synchronicities, and they're following the flow of them. And then we've got other people who, until the transition of a loved one, had never experienced these things before, have never gone looking for them, and it's only when they meet other people that they're like, oh, that's what I've been experiencing. It's fascinating, isn't it? But they
Yeah,
all do.
that's my case. That's exactly my case. I've had people pass in my life before, like my grandfather, never got any, signs, visitations, not that I know of. But yeah, what you're saying is absolutely true.
It's like even interesting. I've been at home over Easter. It was really lovely going home, but when I go home, I go visit my friend Jackie, who also featured in one of the interviews. And we talked to Jackie about the reconnection of her family. And what's really fabulous is the day we met in Yorkshire, the day after, my sister gave me a photograph, and the photograph actually had both our relatives in the photograph. They went to school together, they were in the same classroom, but my sister had no idea of the connection. And therefore, when she gave me the photograph, it illustrated to me that the spirit world are almost wanting to let you know, like, we know you were together last night, or we know that you were talking about us. And, that photograph not only was really special to me, because I didn't know it existed, but also to share it with my friend Jackie was just incredible. It had such a profound effect on her when she realised that we actually had a visual of the sort of 6 degrees of separations that had kind of connected us from across the veil in the living. And it's really profound because, I haven't known, I've maybe known Jackie about 8 to 10 years now, Andy. But I think because of the way that we were connected through these connections that seem to come from across the veil, it has had a real profound effect on the two of us. Our friendship is cemented by something much deeper and stronger, and therefore seems to endure sort of more things. It's kind of something that we're both profoundly grateful for. I don't know if you've had experiences like that with the inspired connections yourself, but it's something I'm really grateful for. I feel that these inspired connections, because it's almost like your loved one introducing you to somebody in the living. Does that make sense? And because of that sentimental value that it has, it means that the relationship is almost like more, it's not that it's more precious, but it's kind of more profound. You know that it's more sacred. You know that it's been placed there for a reason, and therefore you pay more attention to it. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, no,
No, I was just going to say, have you experienced that as well, Andy?
no, and I have kind of the gist of what we're talking about is first of all, it's an kind of an implicit question: do inspired connections exist? And I think over the 31 episodes that we've done, I think we've demonstrated, like you said, people from all walks of life, all kind of spiritual backgrounds, have experienced very real things, right? Like you ask about me, before Josh passed, I had a very different view of the world, spirituality, things like that. Where I stand today, I mean, like Omar in his session last week, he doesn't have to believe anymore. He knows. Right. And while I haven't had an NDE, I've had enough of my own experiences to know that, yeah, inspired connections do exist. Our loved ones are with us all the time. They make it known in very simple ways or sometimes really complex ways. So for me, it's a settled question. I know that a lot of our viewers probably aren't in that same space. And I think that's the value of watching these is you don't have to take my word for it, right? My signs are my signs. Your signs are your signs. But we've got 31 episodes of people telling their stories and it's their experiences, right? So
Can I ask, Andy, before you lost Josh, did you ever have any inspired connections? Or when you look back, did you experience? So mine definitely feels like it was triggered as the loss of somebody very, very close to me. But then I question sometimes, is that just because I wasn't noticing? I wasn't, it's like I can look back on life and say that there were crazy things that happened to me before he transitioned. There were some inspired connections that definitely existed, that I saw and I witnessed, but I maybe just didn't put the same emphasis to them because they didn't have the personal connection to somebody that I had known in life. There definitely was strange things that happened to me that got me to certain locations or places. So I feel that when I look at my life, I think I've had inspired connections happening throughout my life, but they've become more obvious or more potent to me as a result of somebody transitioning from life across the veil. They've become more important or more sentimental or more obvious to me in some way. Does that make sense?
Mhm. Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, and I think I'm sure, I mean, my viewpoint of the world now is that we are awash in spiritual experience, right? The magic, right? I think it's probably scientific. I think it has a lot to do with the quantum realm. I think that we are spiritual beings in a material world. And I think I never thought of it like that, but I think that's exactly what it is. So I think the inspired connections and the signs and the activities of our guides have obviously, in my opinion, have always been active. We just haven't been cracked open enough to be sensitive to it. I think the loss of a loved one, especially a child, rips away all of the, at least it did for me, it stripped away all of what I thought I knew, and made me question everything. And then through personal experience with working with you and working with, other spiritual healers and just, the people that do this work from a healing perspective every day, I worked with lots of folks, and the thing that keeps getting introduced to me is these spiritual experiences are real. There was a time that I doubted them, but like Dr. Jeff O'Driscoll said in his episode, stop questioning, right? You're getting these miracles, you're getting these gifts from beyond the veil. Stop questioning, right? So now when I hear my voice in my head with Josh's accent telling me, hey, do this, or, telling me a joke or whatever we're doing, I hear my voice, but I know it's from him. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And we've seen, haven't we, through the series, we've seen the episodes, we've seen people that have transformed their life, they've changed complete directions. So, like Irene, Elizabeth, we've seen them create charities, we've seen them create podcasts and platforms, that we've seen them go on to inspire people, help many, many people in service. So there's definitely something where these inspired connections create community, they inspire people to do incredible things, to go above and beyond their day jobs and to help people on a voluntary basis, which is kind of really amazing. And we've also seen people do it vocationally, myself, in terms of I do voluntary work, but I do paid work as well. So we see that people will leave complete career. I lived a career of 21 years, very successful, very happy. And then one day I changed just on, not on a whim, but on these very inspired choices. So it can change your life. I'm also fascinated at some of the things that really stood out for me are things like the themes that seem to appear as well. So when we're looking at yourself and Joelle, and we see that, her life and that of her child is saved by her partner who transitions on ice. And then we have when you experience your cancer, you slipping on the ice or feeling like you're being pushed on the ice to get you into the ER ward in order to be able to experience the tests that would reveal that you've got cancer in a certain location. I mean, all these little things, they're really fascinating, aren't they? There definitely seems to be a logical rationale to them, even though they're very intuitive in sort of experience or kind of, I don't know, birth, if you will. They sort of come out of nowhere in an intuitive way, but they do seem to have a rational and logical behind them. And there does seem to be either sort of the response of healing, joy, or bringing more comfort or ease. It seems to elevate the vibration of people. It definitely seems to fulfill a potential of some description. Does that make sense?
No, it totally does. Yeah, I definitely think there's themes. You can look at the episodes that we've done, and each person will have, I think, from 1,000-foot level, a theme of how spirit is interacting with them. I know in my case, the cancer, I can't communicate well enough how much I didn't want to do chemo. Now, I don't know why. But I mean, from the very beginning, I'm not doing chemo. I know it's not going to work. There's got to be other things that we can try. And in my case, if I would have done the chemo, it wouldn't have been effective, and I probably wouldn't be on this call right now. So I think that when it is absolutely critical, and even probably when it's not, those themes, spirit is guiding us. We have, as we're going to talk about in a couple of weeks, our life plans. Now, I'm not a complete convert to the life plan idea. I've read his book, Robert Schwartz.
I want to explain though for people listening, they might be thinking, what are they talking about? Soul plan. So there is a concept or idea, a belief system, if you will, that some people feel that our life here on earth is actually already preordained. They already think that we have already made the decisions in spirit and that we're just playing out the role that we came to play. Would you say that's fair enough?
I think that is, and that's the hard part about it, right? It's like, what do you mean? I would sign up for this life. I'm not that brave, right? That's my personal response.
Yeah, true. True. It's like I didn't know when I first started this work before I ended up working in America, and people kept asking me about soul playing. I wasn't a big subscriber to it. I didn't really believe in it, and I said I wouldn't really comment until Spirit inspired me one way or the other that there was evidence of it, and that's when they did a series of synchronicities that linked me up with Robert and Sarah Rubble, who we're going to be meeting in a couple of weeks' time, who are experts on the subject matter. But also they sent clients with really incredible stories, and I won't give all the stories away because I think we'll unveil them as we talk to Robert and Sarah, but it has really made me question, like, what is free will? Is free will actually our attitude towards something, that actually certain events and situations are predestined? I know myself from having received from Spirit a postcard in December that indicated a lot of the things that happened to me in the last year, that I couldn't have changed any of those things from happening or occurring to me. All I can change is my attitude towards them, or how I respond to them is kind of the feeling that I've gauged from it. Because what's really interesting there is it's a weird one, because on a way it takes away an element of personal responsibility, which I'm not sure I'm comfortable with, Andy, because if I can't change or control any of these things are going to happen no matter what the decision. But then on the other side, they kind of eliminate, if you will, sort of a disempowering of your spirit, or kind of, what do I mean by that? A kind of, in a way, they mean that regardless of what you've done or how you've done something, you couldn't have changed that situation from arising. And therefore, what I think it does is it keeps you more in the now and less in the sort of past or the future, because you're very aware that what you're experiencing is predetermined or meant to be in some way, that your soul has chosen to explore this with a community of other individuals or souls. And therefore, it's a real challenging one. If I look at the Leslie situation, for instance, where they've experienced this terrorist situation, it throws so many dilemmas up, Andy, because you're like, I wouldn't like to think that something like that was targeted couldn't, A, first of all, couldn't be prevented, and B, why would we come down as individual souls to do that to one another? I find that really, really challenging. And yet I have, met children that have transitioned in the most traumatic ways through murders and other situations, where they share with me signs and synchronicities and things that they knew and were predetermined to them before they experienced some of these things. And it really does challenge my whole sort of belief system and ideas about spirituality. It completely, what's really interesting about them is that they're not the way that I've been brought up to believe, or what I've experienced through spirit in my everyday life. And yet I can't deny the conversations or the commentary that comes from the spirit world. And therefore, I don't want to be naive in my thinking and presume that I know everything and that I've got this all sussed out, because clearly I haven't. None of us have, We've only all got small little aspects of our own experiences. And sometimes it is by coming together in a forum like this and chatting away that suddenly you have these light bulb moments of like, whoa, one of the things, when I was I've interviewed Robert a few times, and it'd be really interesting when he comes on in a few weeks' time in terms of soul planning. He is the author of My Soul's Gift and My Soul's Plan and a few other books. And
Great books, by the way.
yeah, really brilliant books. And they've helped a lot of people in our communities that have suffered grief and the transition of loved ones. And he's a really fascinating person. I really admire him for going out on a limb to kind of deliver this kind of subject matter to the public. You know, one of the things that Robert had said to me once when we were talking about suicide and could suicide be prevented and all these kind of things, and he said, you know, in his research that he found that certain individuals would, if they were supposed to or had elected to transition in a certain way, they would, and if they weren't supposed to transition in that way, something would happen to create or prevent that from happening. And then we see in these, you know, we never broached in the interview with Dennis. That's what's so fabulous about some of these podcast interviews. You know, never once shared the views that Robert had given to me, Andy, or implied them in any way to Dennis. And yet he was in his interview talking about the transition of Michael, his son, from suicide, and how he had all these questions about, you know, could it have been the drugs? Could it have been prevented? And there he goes about to try it himself and finds out it is the drugs, and he finds out that it, you know, that he wasn't supposed to transition that way, and therefore his transition is prevented. It's kind of fascinating, isn't it? It's kind of you see these moments and they defy logic in some way and rationale, and yet they clearly exist. And so by coming together in these podcasts, I'm finding it really fascinating to sort of see the things that Spirit are inspiring through people and the kind of information that they're sharing, which is fairness is only a small aspect of their life and their soul plan that they're homing in on. It is kind of really cool, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's not a settled concept in my mind either, because all the things you talk about, like in my personal story, Josh wanted to come with me to England, and I could have made that happen, right? But I didn't. He had his car wreck. I felt very guilty about that initially. And then in one of the first times that I meditated really on this spiritual journey, he told me I wouldn't have transitioned if you were here, right? Because I asked him, why? Why did you do that? And, why did you pick when I was gone, farthest away from you to transition?
You
And
were
so
in London at the time that he
I was in London when he passed, right? And
which is kind of profound, even the fact that I'm in London.
there's a lot of connections that we don't have time for on this episode, but I've always felt very connected to Kat, even since our first reading. So there's a lot. I mean, and that's what I mean. I think the inspired connections, they can be just a feather on the ground, or they can be multidimensional and mean so many other things. And to me, we were talking earlier about, spirit kind of has woven itself through and we're kind of showing it in these interviews. That makes perfect sense to me. Do you know what I mean? It's like, man, I don't want to get too philosophical about it, but the fact that we are given these gifts, we are given these signs, we're given the connections, you're given what you're given by spirit. We're not going to know the whole story, right? We're not going to, spirit's not going to say, here, this is the book and this is how life is and this is how I don't think that's the purpose.
I think they choose not to, actually.
Yeah.
Some people say to me, why don't you tell me everything? And it's like, I can't, because spirit will only unveil certain things at the time, because otherwise you're going to rush ahead. You're going to go straight from A to Z instead of doing A, B, C, D, E. You're not going to concentrate on the actual thing that they want you to learn in that moment, because you're going to forward project. That's human nature in a certain way, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think that's critical for our viewers who watch these to understand, particularly if you're early in your journey. We have to go through the steps, right? We have to experience, I think, the things we have to experience to, I don't know, to learn the things we're supposed to learn. And I know that's very like, blah, right? Not very concrete, but that's my thing. Is part of me, I love the spiritual, I love the metaphysical, I love all the stuff we talk about. But then I also have to tell myself that, hey, you got to focus on the now, right? You got to learn this thing before you can do this thing. It's a walk before you can run. So yeah, I think that's the other part that nobody really ever talks about, is Yeah, if I knew that Josh was going to pass, on a human level, I wouldn't have left, right? And he wouldn't have passed, and woulda, coulda, shoulda, and all these things. It happened the way it had to happen, in my viewpoint. And on all the other people we've talked to, I think they're in the same position. It had to happen. The unimaginable things happen, but look at where we are now today, right?
Yeah, as soon as you're saying that, the story of Mark Island and Elizabeth come into my mind, and the fact that both their children pass on mountains. Both the day that Brandon, Mark's son, passes, he tried everything to persuade him otherwise from going to the mountain. He had this intuitive feeling that this was a day of significance and one that he felt something could potentially happen. Mark's very intuitive. He is a very logical, rational guy, works in a very corporate job and background, and yet on that particular day he tried even persuaded, I think he was trying to persuade him to see a Metallica musician in order to bribe him from going to the mountain that day, and yet he goes and that tragedy happens. But the fact that there was a group of individuals that were there on the mountain on the same day at the same time to be able to support the aftermath of what happens as well is kind of incredible. These mountains are a big mountain range. The chances of these people being in those locations at that time, it's a little bit like if you ever listen to Dr. Mary O'Neill, who was at one of the conferences, Andy, she talks about having her near-death experience in a kayak on the waterways in Chile, and how she's transitioned for half an hour. She shouldn't even survive that kind of situation. And they're in the middle of nowhere. There are no cars. There are no people around except for the group that she's actually travelling with that are behind her. And yet here in the middle of Chile, there is two individuals that carry her kayak out of the water, and there's a waiting ambulance. And they ask the ambulance, what are you doing here? And the answer that they get from the driver is waiting. Like, waiting for what? These moments where people are positioned in certain locations at specific times to allow these inspired connections to happen, there's clearly some kind of planning involved in some of them. If I look at the trip that the children sent me on to France, for instance, I thought I was very good at picking up signs and synchronicities, and then to sit down at my desk on what would turn out to be Morgan, Elizabeth's son's birthday. I think it was his birthday, so it was a significant milestone date. When I suddenly contact her to say, Morgan's here, he says, I love you. He's taking the mick out of me. I think I'm a master of science, but apparently I've missed loads. And he's asked me to go back and look at the photographs that I've taken. And he tells me that Sean's with me in a vineyard, and I think, it can't be. And then I look at the photos and I'm like, oh my gosh, and I notice these things that I haven't even seen, Andy. So another thing I'd probably say to the viewers, in all honesty, is look back, record what you're experiencing, take a journal. But also, if you are a photographer like me who photographs everything, as many of us do now on these iPhones and devices that we've got, or people that, make little memos or voice memos on the phone, go back and re-look at them. Go back and re-look at some of the things. Once you notice a theme that arises or signs and synchronicities, look back and reflect upon them, because you may notice many, many things that you just didn't notice at the time that you were experiencing them. And that was certainly the case for me in France. And I was kind of blown away. And I suppose what was really impactful about that as well, Andy, is that when I look back at that situation, it was what gave it the magic and awe, is the fact that here I am, supposedly well attuned to the spirit world and very, aligned with signs and synchronicities, a great believer in them. And I hadn't even noticed half of the things until Morgan points them out on that birthday. And, it's very, very clever, I feel. And, the fact that he planted 7 cats within the photographs as well. And he lived in France for 7 years, and that every room that I stayed in the hotels had 7 outside of it. And I was trying to understand the significance of 7 and the importance of 7. You have all these little themes that arise that are they're so much greater. And it's like when you unpack them, that's where the joy or the magic or the inspiration is, isn't it? It's like these moments. I think
Yeah.
if everything was so obvious, perhaps we wouldn't get that kind of wonder and awe that is really part of this journey. It really is, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think that's a huge point. I've had new dads that'll ask me, well, how do I know if a sign is a sign, right? When is a feather and when is it a sign, that kind of thing. And my response, I have different responses, but my main response is, how does it make you feel, right? If it brings you joy and even for a moment and, fills your heart full of love, and does it feel like a hug from the person, that is beyond the veil? That to me, I mean, that's if spirit is love and it's giving you love, then how can it be bad, right? I don't understand when people argue and they're like, oh, this isn't a good thing. And I'm like, it's an amazing thing. It makes the unimaginable a little better, right? Maybe it's just a coin that you see or a full on, dream visitation like Colin that he has. I mean, those things are just, if they make you feel great and they make your life a little bit easier, then to me, that's the whole point of it, right? That's the whole entire point.
I think as well they repeat. You get repetition. When I was doing a demonstration at Jackie's house a few days ago, what was really amazing, and one of the signs one of the people in the audience got is silver coins, 5 pence pieces from their loved one, and they actually saved her and her friend had saved up a whole jar of them. And Jackie not realised, Jackie owns a cafe, and this little jar was in the cafe on the side. Jackie not realising the significance that it wasn't chips and it wasn't taking, just thought, why is this random pot of 5 pence there? So she just threw it into the tip, collection, thinking, and then the girls are going crazy. No, where's the 5 pence gone? And the first thing that the loved one in spirit world says to me is, he's giving me a pot of 5 pence pieces, and he's laughing at the fact that Jackie didn't understand the significance of them and had placed them into the tips jar, and they were like, no, they're my 5 pences, and so I think repetition, but also the sense of humour as well, that tends to be come out of these situations as well. I think they're very light-hearted, and I think you're right, they don't create any harm, so they don't seem to anyway. I don't think we've experienced an interview yet where somebody said something detrimental has happened as a result of one of these signs or synchronicities. Would you agree?
I've never heard that, not even once. The only thing that I've ever heard that's not positive is when folks don't get signs or they don't recognize them and they feel like, well, for some reason I'm not seeing things. I felt that in my own life.
Yeah.
Right. That's the only bad thing is when you're like, I have to see a sign. Well, relax. It's like a radio tuning. Once you relax and you open up to it, you'll see it. But you also have to be very thankful when right? You can't go, oh, well, this isn't a sign. And then, you let the logical mind just get in the way of it. At some point you're going to have to surrender and say that feather is a blessing and I'm going to view it that way. Right.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I suppose that comes from people being very analytical, but I think part of these signs of what we're seeing is you can be analytical and they still arise, and you still can't comprehend them. But I agree, people will say to me as well, Andy, but I've been on this journey for a long, long time and I'm not experiencing the signs of synchronicities that this person is. And it's really frustrating me and it's upsetting me. Does my loved one not love me? Why are they not rising to me? What I'd say to that is, my grandfather was 11 years in spirit. And I'd actually said to him 6 weeks prior to him transitioning, if there is an afterlife, come back and give me a huge sign. And he did. But it was 22 years later. And it was 11 years before I noticed the signs and synchronicities. And maybe they were there all the time. It was the accumulation, the repetition, or the strength of focus at the moment that created a pivotal change. I remember I was the first synchronicity of signs that I recall with him that really sort of made me sit up is I was in a pub in London. I was having a meal, just an everyday meal, probably for Easter or a special occasion or something, with family and friends. And a book came flying off the shelf and it landed in front of me. That's really random. Nearly took me out, but it had his name on it. And I thought, that's really strange. I just thought, oh, maybe it's a coincidence. I picked it up and I put it back on the shelf and thought that's really, really odd. But then we leave the restaurant and the pub, and I, in an area that we know really well, took a wrong turn randomly in the car to a street that has his name on it. And then I look up and the block of flats has his name on it. So much so that I stop the car, I get out of the car, and something tells me, look down at the tile that you're, the paving stone that you're standing on. And there's his nickname on the tile underneath me. And it just didn't seem random, Andy. It just was so... And that has happened, and like you said, a feeling will come with it, where I've been in different locations and suddenly I felt an urge to turn in a certain direction. And there again, his name is present. I just find it really, really fascinating and very interesting. And it always gives me a feeling of comfort and peace, like they're still here. That's really, really nice. But you can't predict it, can you, Andy? I think, if people do want to experience them more or aren't experiencing them, first of all, you have got to have a level of belief or openness towards them. You have to document them, because that way you can't talk yourself out of self-doubt. Because when you realise how frequently they're happening, or the commonness of the theme or the significance of the dates, you suddenly realise that there's a logical rationale to them, that they aren't just inspired intuitive connections of you kind of wishful thinking, if you like. And then I think if you talk about them, you get enthusiastic, or you say thank you, like you said, there definitely seems to be, once the spirit person realises, oh, they've recognised that, they've acknowledged that as something that I do. It's like the sign I get from one of my friends in spirit. Like, I really don't even know if he ever wore the t-shirt, that brand that I associate with him. But I remember one day just passing him in the street, passing this t-shirt in the street and thinking, and saying very sort of out loud in my mind, oh my God, every time I see a t-shirt with that brand on it, for some reason it reminds me of you. And then that became our thing. And it's a bit like, when I was saying in one of the interviews, I was actually in the theatre in the West End, and I heard, because I hear spirit, and I'm working with spirit on a daily basis, I perhaps have a little bit more of a heads up than some people in terms of these inspired connections. But I heard him say, literally, look to the left, stare at the girl that's a Chinese girl a few rows in front, and she's going to stand up in a moment and watch what happens. And sure enough, I look to my left, she stands up and she turns around and she's got the brand name that I associate with him on the cap that she's wearing. It's a very old-fashioned brand. It's not something that you commonly see. It's maybe 20, 30 years old. It's just not random, Andy. Every time I'm in the airport, it's like when I text you and I said, oh, he's here, because the person in front of me has the t-shirt on in the queue. It's just too uncanny. It's like, I went punting with Ava in Cambridge the other day. We had to go up north for a reason, and we stopped off in Cambridge on the way, and it was so random, but there in the boat coming towards us, there's the t-shirt, and I'm like, oh my gosh, he's here. It's like my little thing of, he's here. Isn't that interesting? It's almost like being set up. And I know you have that experience too, and a lot of people that we've interviewed have, but it is so unique and personal to each individual. Some things are more generic, like feathers and coins, but some things are so specific, like your Neftar or the t-shirt brand that I associate. It's not random. And I remember hearing David Kessler, who, if anybody knows who David Kessler is, he's a grief expert in the USA. And one of his books, Finding Meaning, is one of my favourite grief books, because it's very simple to read, but it's got such beautiful advice in it. And I was lucky enough to see him talking at a conference, and I recall him saying that, when his son David died, he would get t-shirts like I do, and he won't tell anybody, like I won't, what the brand is, so that it doesn't randomly turn up, defying logic because of somebody's intention, but it will always turn up when he's doing a public performance. It will always turn up at a significant point. And again, I believe that his sign and is very unique. It's not something that you can put your finger on. It's not something that is very personal to him and his son's journey. And so I find these things, they happen to rational people. That's what I'm trying to say. He's a very logical, scientific person, somebody who has really worked hard in the psychology background, and yet is open to receiving these signs and believes in them, and perhaps believes in them through the experiences that he's had. And maybe this became such a frequent thing that he just started to notice it and associate it, and through that association it became significant. So these things are just amazing, aren't they? And it's, I still hark back. The real thing that really sticks in my mind is like Nan and Jeff, when they were saying they weren't even looking for it and it came and found them. So this idea, when people say, Andy, that, yeah, but what if they don't want to be disturbed? What if these connections were going looking for them? But I look at Nan and Jeff's situation and I think, well, they didn't go looking for it. They clearly the communication, the desire was coming from the other side of the veil to make and create that connection. And, I've seen it today, actually, just randomly happened to me. I didn't even know we had spam emails on Messenger. And today, to my horror, I discovered these spam emails, of which, several people were reaching out saying, how do I get a reading with you? How do I book it? And I was like, oh my God. One of them was 3 years old. Believe it or not, Andy, one of them was 3 years.
That poor person.
So I wrote to this lady and I just said, I am so sorry. I have just discovered this spam file in a really random place that I didn't know existed, and your text is in it. And she's texted me back saying, when can you fit me in? Because today is a really significant date. Something has inspired you to find that spam on this occasion because it's my child's anniversary. And you just think to yourself, like, was that supposed to be? Because it needed to create that special moment, or am I just a dunce? It just doesn't look at nothing. Technology it's just magical, isn't it? So you get these experiences that kind of create these wow moments that kind of really define timing, and then you also see transformative experiences happening where, I look at Warren and Sheila and how their story unfolds. We were talking before we came on about, I think Sheila's comment, as it did with you, Andy, about silence. Her son was musical, the house was always very loud, and then the minute that he transitions, silence is louder than any noise heard. I mean, that was such a pivotal comment, wasn't it? It was something that stayed with me for days.
Yeah, it's something that, like you said, it stuck with me. It's still, I mean, we talked about it before the episode.
Yeah, it's really, really powerful, isn't it? And you sort of see that they've gone on to do this inspiring charity that gives them a lot of joy and keeps that connection alive. And it's very transformative. It's really amazing. So I hope people out there are enjoying the series. I hope you're starting to dissect things the way that we are. You can tell that we're not rehearsed. We never know what we're going to say. We work in the moment and we just wait and see how the spirit or our spirits sort of inspire us and what to say. But if you have got questions, you can contact us on the Facebook page, be making connections possible, or you can text Andy and I through my website as well, catbee.com. I promise you that we will explore your questions, and if you've got special guests or people that you think, wow, I've heard the most amazing inspired connection story, you need to hear this, please put people in touch, because we'd love to hear from you. There's a lot of we've got loads of people ahead of us, Andy, that have got some incredible stories that I can't wait to share with everybody. But equally, we're open to seeing how this sort of cascades in a way, aren't we? Because it's just, the whole thing is just an exploration spirit, and helping sort of transform people's ideas about these things, which is really, really, really beautiful. Anything else that you want to say, Andy, or that's really stuck out for you?
Yeah, really quick. I've never asked anybody to like or subscribe. Typically on, YouTube, you always see that. We've never asked that. Kat and I really want this to be a conversation. That's why some of the episodes can be an hour and a half long. Sometimes we have to cut them into 2 or 3, because we believe that these stories are important. They may not be polished, they may not be packaged, but that's not what we do. I'm not a podcaster, Kat's not a podcaster. We want to bring these stories forth. So please like, subscribe Also, comment if you can. If there's things you want us to cover, please say it. And we're doing this for you because trust me, both of our families on Easter, no less, would love to have us with them instead of talking transatlantically right now.
Absolutely, and that's what's so even funny, isn't it? It's like it's the amount of time that goes into the conversation, also the editing. Like we're kind of crazy people that do these things for free because we just want to help people, and so if it is helping, that's great, and if it doesn't, then we'll stop.
Yeah, please let us know that too.
Absolutely, absolutely. So it's kind of key. But anyway, this series is just me and Andy touching base, and really just wanting to say Happy Easter to you. And as Andy says, you know, we're here. Reach out to us, share with us your views, your questions, your viewpoints. We'll try to explore them and find somebody. If we can't answer them, somebody else that can or can cover them in a way that brings them to life. So it's really lovely to be here, and I wish you all the best today. Thank you, Andy. Take care.